everybody, I'm Dave Stutts, and this is Intro to MIDI Controllers Part 2, how to set up your MIDI controller so that you can get the most out of it. Now to start things off, I said this in the previous video. If you go out and buy a MIDI controller and plug in the USB from the MIDI controller into your computer, more than likely you're going to be able to start playing your virtual instruments. And here's what I meant by that. Everybody has a different computer setup. For instance, here at work I use a Mac with Apple operating system and Logic Pro X. But at home, I use a custom-built PC running Windows, and I use Cubase. So even with me, I have two different computer setups doing two different things, two different sets of protocols, drivers, operating systems, components, you name it. So all I meant by that is that if you have a fairly new computer running a fairly new operating system, you should be able to pick yourself up a MIDI controller, plug it right in, and start playing your virtual instruments, no problem. And the reason that is because modern MIDI controllers are what we call class compliant, or plug and play, meaning you can plug the USB right into your computer, and it's just going to work with all of the drivers that just already exist on your computer. You shouldn't have to download anything or install anything. But let's say you have a MIDI controller that's a little more complicated, like this one, the Arturia KeyLab 88 Mark II, and you want to get the most out of it. When I first got the KeyLab, I plugged it into my computer, pulled up a set of strings, hit the record button, and this happened. Pretty crazy. And that's because this wasn't set up properly within itself and within Logic. So if you run into that problem, here's what you should do. So to start things off, make sure your MIDI controller is plugged in via USB from the controller into your computer. Now the next thing I did is that Arturia has its own proprietary software called MIDI Control Center. So I open it up, and now I have this nice overview of the Arturia, and I can click these different parameters and do different things with them. But I went over to device settings up here in the top right corner. So I came over here to DAW, looked at DAW map, and I chose Logic, but obviously you can choose whatever DAW you're using. And then where it says DAW fader mode, I selected jump. Then I came over here to controller map, made sure I was on user 1, and then clicked store 2. And then it uploaded all of my settings into the KeyLab. Then just to make sure everything was correct, I clicked on DAW, then I clicked and held it, and right up there it shows DAW mapping set to Logic. And as you can see, I can actually change it right here. I don't need MIDI Control Center. I can just use the toggle wheel, but we'll leave it on Logic. Now we're not quite done yet. We put all the correct settings into the MIDI controller, but now we need to go into Logic and make some changes here. Go into Logic Pro X, Control Surfaces, and Setup. That's going to open this window here, and I already have it set up right here as a mkII control device. That's what we're aiming for. Now if this isn't here, which it probably won't be if you've never done this before, you're going to click New, scan all models. All of these italicized MIDI controllers are not natively scannable within Logic. And boom, as you can see right here, the Arturia KeyLab 88 is one of those, but it doesn't matter. There's something else we can do. So we're going to scroll down until we find mkII Designs, and we're going to choose mkII Control, Logic Control, and just click Add. So once you do that, you're going to have this mkII Control icon right here. These may be closed on your end. Just click Device, where it says mkII Control, and for output port, you're going to do KeyLab Mark II 88 DAW, or whatever MIDI controller you have. And input port, you're going to do the same thing, KeyLab Mark II 88 DAW, or whatever your MIDI controller is. And after that, everything came together for the Arturia. Every button worked properly, every fader, every encoder, everything made sense. And Arturia is pretty cool. They include these DAW command templates of various DAWs. See, on this end it says Pro Tools, but I'm using Logic on this end, and then I can just drop it over the top here so that all of the buttons make sense. So the first thing you're going to want to buy for your MIDI controller, either immediately or shortly thereafter, is a sustain pedal. Now if you don't know what that is, it's just like on a piano. When you hold down the sustain pedal, you can play the notes and let go, as opposed to this. You're going to use a sustain pedal all the time when you're recording, no matter what instruments you're using, be it strings, piano, brass, synths, anything. And sustain pedals are very straightforward. They come with a 1/4-inch jack that just plugs right into the back of your MIDI controller. Now, of course, different MIDI controllers come with different options, but generally speaking, I've never seen a MIDI controller that didn't have an option for a sustain pedal. Now, some MIDI controllers offer an option for an expression pedal, and if you can pick one up, I highly recommend it. Let me show you what an expression pedal can do. So I'm going to open up Contact and open up one of my favorite little plugins here, Analog Dreams, which is part of the complete suite of native instruments. And I'm going to go to one of my favorite leads. It's called Brute Brassic. And on its own, it sounds like this. Pretty cool, but with an expression controller, we can make it a little cooler. I'm going to right-click on Cutoff, and I'm going to say Learn MIDI CC Automation, and I'm just going to work the expression pedal, and boom, now you can see it bouncing back and forth. And now what I can do is I can control the cutoff with my foot while I play. Cool, so you get the idea. You can control MIDI parameters with your foot while you're playing. It's pretty awesome. Now, depending on which MIDI controller you pick up, you may have some extra input options on the back. For instance, on the KeyLab 88, there's some extra aux inputs where I can set up more foot switches to control more MIDI parameters. Some controllers, such as this, also have MIDI in and out, so you can hook up some of your favorite MIDI devices right to your MIDI controller. And some MIDI controllers offer something called Aftertouch, which is really cool. Yours might, the KeyLab does, so I'm going to show you what Aftertouch is real quick. So I opened Analog Lab 4, which comes bundled with the KeyLab 88, and I chose 6-string shamisen because this is the one I know right off the bat incorporates Aftertouch. So here's what it normally sounds like. But listen to what happens when I press it, and then I give it just a little bit more afterwards. So that's what Aftertouch is. You hit a note, then you give it just a little bit more, and it brings out a little more nuance in the instrument. Not every instrument is compatible with Aftertouch. They have to design that when they're designing the instrument. So scroll through your plugins, try a few instruments, and you might find some that incorporate Aftertouch, and it's pretty cool. All right, everybody, that's it for part 2. In part 3, we're going to start using the faders, encoders, scroll knob, transport controls, all that great stuff. So until then, I'm Dave Stutts, and I'll see you next time.